So in the first half of this segment, we discussed many different influences on policy making. The first thing we had spoke about was the way that the media influences public policy and the role that they play in shaping the different laws that would be passed by lawmakers. We then spoke about the definition of lobbying and what the role of a lobbyist is when they seek to influence legislators to introduce or vote for or against a bill. We then finished up with how individuals influence public policy, and this is the category that we would fall into. And we actually were able to watch a video of William and Mary college students who had sought out lawmakers to influence public policy on higher education. The next topic we're going to discuss is how interest groups influence public policy. If you think back to this unit's vocabulary, an interest group is a group of people who share a common opinion or a common viewpoint and unite to promote their beliefs. So they also influence public policy, and here's how. The first way that interest groups influence public policy is they identify key issues, the issue that united them in the first place. So the issue that their members are passionate about and knowledgeable of, they would identify those key issues. The second way that interest groups influence public policy is they make political contributions. So they'll actually do a lot of fundraising and participate in political campaigns by donating money. This can be very advantageous for them if they're contributing to government officials who will support their beliefs and who will promote their cause. So they will choose to donate money to presidential candidates or to candidates for the legislative branch who are willing to support their beliefs. The third way that interest groups influence public policy is they too lobby government officials. So an interest group may have many members and they might just be involved on a part-time basis. They will often hire someone full-time who is going to promote their cause and who is going to work on Capitol Hill and lobby government officials. Let's take a look at a pretty interesting video that was created by AP government students about the role of interest groups and how they influence public policy. The video goes fairly quick, but I'm actually going to go back and pause and talk about certain scenes afterwards. But at first, the music is pretty good, so I'm going to watch it straight through first time around. So if you look closely, they start out by defining interest groups as groups that want to pass policy. Their main goal is to influence lawmakers and pass policy that agrees with their views and their beliefs. They don't want their own candidates for office. So think back to political process. Which groups did we learn about that their main goal is to have their candidates in office? If you're thinking political parties, you're correct. Political parties, their goal is to have their candidates in power. Interest groups simply want to pass policy, so their main goal is to find people who are good at influencing public policy. Another key part of this video is when the students explain how interest groups work. Keep in mind that this is for an AP government class, so to keep it simple, let's focus on these ones here. Interest groups work by lobbying and influencing government policy, and they also have political action committees that contribute money to political campaigns. So by donating money to the correct people who are willing to work with their interest group, they can influence public policy. Here are the ways that interest groups have been successful with lobbying. You can see over here, here's the Capitol building, Washington, D.C. All of the lobbyists will approach the politicians at the Capitol. They will also be successful with making calls to policymakers, emailing, meeting, socializing, taking them out to lunch, all different ways that lobbyists can influence public policy and work alongside an interest group. Here are two very famous examples of interest groups that you may be familiar with. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. We spoke a little about the NAACP back in U.S. history class. They're concerned with education, home ownership, job opportunities specifically for colored people, so for black rights. They're concerned with going green, and this interest group tends to be liberal. Another one that you may be familiar with is the NRA, the National Rifle Association. They are concerned with defending our Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. They're concerned about educating people about gun use, and they're opposed to a ban on recreational shooting. So they want to protect recreational gun rights, like hunting, things like that. This group tends to be a little more conservative. So two classic examples of some well-known interest groups. So once again, interest groups influence public policy by identifying key issues that are important to the group, by making political contributions to lawmakers who will support their cause, and by lobbying government officials. We've got one more video about interest groups, and it's by two teachers that create videos called Cram for the Exam. So let's take a look at their interpretation of how interest groups influence public policy.
We're here to cram for the exam, Andy. We just got off our most recent episode talking about political parties. Let's not stray too far. Let's talk about interest groups.
Yeah, whoa, cowboy. Let's not go too fast. We're still talking about linkage institutions. Political parties are one. Interest groups are also a big one in the United States, and probably gaining importance as political parties weaken.
Remember, the fundamental role of political parties is to win elections. The fundamental role of interest groups is to win an issue when debating public policy.
Yes, we know that political parties represent a broad selection of issues. Interest groups are just that. They represent special interests, and it's protected in the First Amendment.
Political parties have a commodity, and that is candidates. Interest groups have a commodity, and that is information. They're all about spreading information to the power players in Washington, D.C., or at any level of government. Remember, they're trying to persuade public policy, and no better way to do that than to manipulate information.
It's all about petitioning the government. And the best way to petition the government is to gain access. Now, that can be access through numbers of having a large demonstration and protest, of gaining the attention of the media, but obviously, increasingly, we're seeing that access being bought in the form of campaign donations.
Andy, this is one reason why interest groups may in fact be growing much faster than political parties. Political parties takes time to change policy. You've got to win elections, recruit candidates, and then hope for the best once you get in the legislative branch. Interest groups can bypass all that. It doesn't matter who's in power, Democrats or Republicans. If you gain access, because that activity is protected by the First Amendment, you might be able to change policy fast.
And we also know that since the 1970s, we've seen a tremendous growth in political interest groups related to corporations. And certainly with recent U.S. Supreme Court decisions about campaign finance, we'll probably see corporation special interest groups, corporate PACs, play even more of a bigger role.
PACs, now you're talking political action committees, Andy. These are the arms of interest groups that are able to give money to candidates.
That's right. Since the 1970s, the federal government has regulated interest groups in how they give to campaigns by making them establish political action committees, which is the financial, legal entity by which a special interest group can donate money.
Andy, let's talk about some of the activities of special interest groups and particular interest groups themselves. One of the more historic interest groups is the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, that used litigation quite successfully throughout the early part of the 20th century to gain greater rights for African Americans.
Because certainly getting legislation passed through Congress can be very difficult, but if you can convince the courts, a few justices here or on the Supreme Court, you can change policy for the entire country.
We're talking about linkage institutions. In the previous episode, we looked at political parties and how they try to win elections by recruiting candidates and changing policy that way. Today we're talking about interest groups. They want to change policy too, but not by winning elections, by changing our minds.
So as you can see, interest groups can definitely play a significant role in influencing public policy. Hopefully these notes have inspired you on ways that you can be involved in the lawmaking process. You don't have to be a politician and you don't have to be employed by the government to play a big role in influencing public policy. Thanks for watching.